Welcome back to another episode of The Human Advisor. In this episode, Larry Sprung of Mitlin Financial joins me and discusses why family is business and how every advisor has a responsibility to be inclusive in their practices, and also his best hacks. You don't want to miss it. Tune in now.
I wanted to know, am I helping the people I'm working with, and am I doing it the right way? And that was really what clicked for me to make a move and really move to the RIA channel.
Today, I have my good friend Larry Sprung of Mitlin Financial joining me. Larry, how you doing?
I am excellent. Thanks for having me today, Dasarte. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It is so good to have you. I have a story about you that I'm going to tell in the middle of the show, but I wanted to just start with you. Now, my senior content manager tells me you have a unique story about the name of your firm, Mitlin Financial. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, so, everybody asks, what's the most asked question that we get at Mitlin? And people think it's about the markets or customer service, client experience, and really the most asked question is, where did the Mitlin name come from? Okay. And essentially it's a conglomerate. MIT was my wife's grandfather, Mitchell. LIN was my mother, Linda.
Okay.
The interesting thing is they both passed away within several hours of each other.
Oh, wow.
And literally about 4 or 5 weeks later, I met my wife. And, we like to think that somewhere along the line, these two people met each other and brought us together, and we were able to create this family. And we only found out about it after meeting each other and spending some time together and reconciling where we were. And we figured out that her grandfather, my mom, passed away literally within hours of each other. And when we were looking to form the firm and create a name, and people who knew my wife's grandfather and people who knew my mom, they were two of the best people. They just had all the values and all the instincts and everything that you would want to be encompassed in a firm. You would want to utilize them as a namesake. So we decided to bring their names together and utilize that as the name of the firm. So there is nobody with the last name Mitlin or any relative. It's literally a name that was brought together from those two great individuals.
I love that. And when I follow you on social media, I see that you're a family man. You're always playing hockey with your sons. After this, I think you're going to visit your sons, right? To visit them in school as they're in boarding school and college. That's amazing. Let's dive into the concept of family. Early Larry, where were you born? Talk to us about that household dynamic.
Yeah, so I was born in Rockland County, which is just probably about 20 or 30 miles north of New York City. And, my household, my dad was a New York City school teacher, and he also did night school when he had to, and he also created a business. He had a food snack business that he packaged his own fruit and nut mixes and sold them to college bookstores. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we got a lot of time to spend with her. Unfortunately, and she passed away at an early age, as I mentioned earlier, at the age of 47. She was diagnosed in her early 30s with breast cancer, and unfortunately passed away from it. And that really changed the whole family dynamic, right? We were not a wealthy family. We weren't poor either. But I saw my dad in terms of trying to juggle everything he needed to juggle, right? And he didn't have a financial advisor. He didn't have anybody to help and guide him. He was more concerned of how am I going to pay the medical bills and keeping track of that and making sure that my sister and I had everything that we had. So it was an interesting dynamic. We grew up very quickly, but it was a great childhood. I couldn't complain about it. And my mom has, again, she lives on in the name of the firm, and she was a role model to me. I mean, she encompassed a lot of the great qualities that people find in me today, and that's really, she's been such a rock in my life, even though I haven't had her for very long.
It's amazing to do these interviews because I feel like I get to know my friends from online in real life. So I lost my dad when I was 12 as well. He was young, strong, like a superhero in my life, and he passed away from terminal prostate cancer. How did that? Thank you. How did that make you feel, right? Like, what did that do to you? You said you grew up young. What does that mean? Because I think I grew up really young, and I still have some of those traits of that time embedded in me now. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I mean, my mom was diagnosed probably around when I was 13 or so, and then she passed away in my early 20s. So I had a younger sister. I had my dad. So, because my dad had the business, I always tried to pitch in and help him with the business. From an early age, this was even before she was sick. At the age of 11, I had a paper route because I was kind of industrious and ambitious and entrepreneurial. So it put me in a position where I had to look after my sister a little bit more, kind of take a little bit of a role model role in her life, and make sure that my mom was taken care of, because my dad couldn't be around all the time. He had to go work, and when he couldn't, then I had to step in and make sure that things were happening while I was doing all the normal kid stuff, right? Going to school and playing hockey as growing up, my sister playing soccer. So it was probably that, and that whole experience is really the reason why family is so important to me. As I'm sure you can attest to in your life, it makes you realize how short a time you can have with those important people in your life, and you want to make the best and the most of it.
I tell my clients that they should optimize every dollar that comes in. And our rule for cash flow management or budgeting is that every dollar must have a destination. And the older I get in reflecting about my dad and just like what he did for us, I think that you have to optimize every second of time as well. I talk about time affluence all the time, but just as it's important to have a direction with your dollars, it's even more important to have a direction and be intentional about your time. So as I grow up, I'm kind of, really honing in on that. Like, I would rather have a great practice, right, that does what it's supposed to do, provides for my family, but being able to spend time with that family is just as important, right?
I say all the time, you could always make more money, you can't make more time, right? You can't. It's the one commodity you can't do anything with. And one of the things that I did, and you might want to keep this in mind for when you start your family. When my kids were born, I started in the summers, I started taking off like a day every week. Actually, I think it was a day a month I started out, and then the next summer I started taking out a day every week in June and July. And then I started June, July, and August. I would take Fridays off. And there are clients still today, and I haven't done that in probably like 5 or 10 years because of the age of my kids, but I have clients till today that still come to me and won't call me on a Friday during the summer because they're like, "You're out with your family, right, today?" Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "Well, they're old. They're out and about now without me, but they still remember that and they appreciate that quite a bit." So, and it's invaluable.
I think business is personal, and I think that the more that we allow our clients in to some degree in our lives, we're able to build a community versus just a book of business. I wanted to ask you about that community. What lessons about money, about hard work? It seems like you were able to observe your dad work really hard. What lessons did you learn with the community that you're around? What did they teach you going through that time as a young adult?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I learned the whole, you can't make more time, but you can make more money. I also understood the value and started realizing as I got older, the value that a financial advisor, wealth advisor, whatever the term you want to, plug in there, how helpful that could be to a family. Because I don't think that if my dad had a financial advisor, I don't think that would have solved his problems, right? My mom still would have been sick, he still would have had to care for her, etc. But I think it might have alleviated some of the burden that he had in terms of taking care of everything, taking care of the financial aspects. Because we've done that for our clients and we know how valuable that is and how much they appreciate it when they're going through a tough time, that planning helps them through it, makes it a little bit more of a smoother ride.
It seems like just like you met your wife and you named your firm, it was almost serendipitous.
Yeah.
Finding finance for you was also serendipitous because you watched what could have been, right? Or you imagined what could have been for your father as he struggled with paying the bills and trying to just hold everything together. So let's talk about that, finding finance. How did you get into the industry?
Oh, it was a long, windy path. But essentially, I first wanted, and I've told this story before, but I went into college. I was going to be in pre-med.
Okay.
And first semester of my freshman year, rather, I started thinking about it, and I started really reflecting on what this was going to mean: the time commitment, the education commitment, the financial commitment. And I was like, I got to get out of school and start making some money and doing something meaningful. I didn't want to wait that long.
I hear you. My pockets were, but go ahead.
So I figured out, I had the most credits to being a math major. So I was like, you know what? I'll be a math major. Had no clue what I was going to do.
Right.
Fast forward to between my junior and senior year of college, I had to get a job because I had to take some classes to make up for that lost time that I missed early on. And a buddy of mine, and I'm going to date myself here, comes to me, a housemate says, I'm just wrapping up my internship with Dean Witter.
Oh, wow.
The advisor would like to have somebody else. He'd rather get a recommendation from me than get somebody else. Would you be interested? Yeah, sure, I'll take a look. So I took the internship, and I took a job at Denny's at the same time. And long story short, I went to the Denny's job. I lasted there an hour. It was not for me. But you talk about serendipity. I walked out of there, went across the street to get a slice of pizza, and there was a photo studio, portrait studio, that was advertising a job for a telemarketer. And I was like, you know what, I think I can do that. So I went in, I got hired. I was selling Watch Me Grow picture packages where somebody would pay $20 and essentially they would get a sitting every quarter with their new baby and get a photo.
Wow.
And again, I took the internship at Dean Witter, really enjoyed that. I took the telemarketing experience. I really liked that. I enjoyed it.
So you like being on the phones?
I did like being on the phones. I don't do that as much now because times have changed a bit, but I took the two together and I said, you know what? I like CNBC. I used to watch it often. I like the markets. I like what's going on at Dean Witter. And again, that serendipitous piece of where my family came from, I'm like, you know what? This feels right, feels good. And I basically ended up getting a role in a financial services firm right out of college. And
which firm was that?
They are no longer in existence. Essentially, if I'm sure most of the people out there have heard it, and yourself included, the Wolf of Wall Street. It was that type of firm on Long Island. And I knew nothing at the time about the business, learned very quickly, and realized that that was not where I wanted to be or needed to be. And essentially, shortly thereafter, started my real career, as I say it, at what's now Morgan Stanley, which was Smith Barney at the time.
Let's talk about those early days, right? I think the industry has changed so much, right? When a relationship with an advisor was receiving a phone call about the newest idea that advisor had. Whereas now, a relationship with an advisor is really getting in deep with your goals, your fears, your aspirations for your family, yourself, your kids, right? That's polar opposite. So when did you realize that you wanted to be on this end of the spectrum versus being a salesman type of advisor?
Yeah, so that all changed for me in the early 2000s. Okay. I started realizing that what got me to the place that I wasn't going to get me to the place where I was going to be. And I had a manager at the time. I was working with the private client group at, it was Bank of America, which then got merged into Merrill Lynch. And I had a manager there that was your traditional salesperson, right? Sales meetings every day, every morning. And she ended up coming to me and saying that, what could we do to be more productive? And I said, well, I can't talk for everybody else, but I'll talk for me. I said, for me to be more productive, cut out all these conference calls. I said, I added it up. I'd get 40 hours a month back. I'm like, that's a full week of work. I guarantee you I'll be more productive if I get those hours back. But it was right then and there that I started realizing that she was really concerned about the corporate environment, the numbers, and that wasn't what I was impressed with, right? I wanted to know, am I helping the people I'm working with, and am I doing it the right way? And that was really what clicked for me to make a move and really move to the RIA channel and start really helping people meet their goals rather than finding products that met their needs.
I love what you just said, and I just want to reiterate that humans are greater than numbers, right? And if you focus on the humans, right, the numbers will come. And I think that's something, particularly for emerging advisors, that we struggle with, right? Because we have so much pressure, as you said, like I wanted to make money fast, right? But the human aspect, the relationship, the service, giving your client something that they can't find anywhere else, that purple cow experience will ultimately lead to scaling your firm in the way that you want to. So I think that if we focus on those humans, and that's the name of this podcast, right? The human advisor, you'll get to every one of your goals. Growth, success is on the other side of that focusing on that individual. I wanted to ask you about practice management, because it seems like you had a great idea about how you wanted to run your firm, right? 40 hours, take it out. We don't need to spend time on those meetings. What do you think is a growth hack for your firm, something that you're doing really well that your clients seem to enjoy?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we do with clients before they're even a client that sets us up and them up for success is we have what we call an is there a fit meeting. So, and the clients know this, so we call it an is there a fit meeting. It's not like it's an internal term that the client or prospect doesn't know about. We call it an is there a fit meeting. And our first meeting is literally, we want to sit down, get together, get to know them, and have them get to know us. They'll call up, what financial documents do you want me to bring?
Yeah.
None. That's not what this meeting's about. This meeting is about to see if you're a good fit for our firm, if you have problems or concerns that we think we can help you work through and work towards your goals, then you're probably going to be a good fit, and vice versa. We want you to make a decision if you think we're a good fit for you and your family, not for today, because we don't want to work with you for a year or 2 or 3, but perpetuity. So that's been really a good hack in terms of kind of navigating the space of who's a good client, not just taking on clients for the sake of taking on clients, but really quality, good fit clients.
Right.
May, to your point, slow down your growth.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that it really embeds that human piece, because now you're working with people that you really want to work with, you really want to know more about, and hopefully they want to know more about you. And we really try to build this culture within the firm, including our stakeholders and our employees, but our clients also, that we're one big family. And that's, we want to know when they're going through good times and bad. And that's really helps, I think, helps the growth aspect of the business tremendously.
When did you implement that is there a fit meeting?
Oh, probably about 10 years ago or so. I have to admit, it was from Duncan McPherson.
Okay.
I don't know if you follow him, the Pareto platform, principle, and he had a great way of working through it. I really enjoyed it and implemented it, and it's really stuck with us. We've tweaked it over the years to some degree in some ways to make it better and refine it, but it's a great process that's worked for us.
Yeah, I asked the question because 3 years ago I did a similar thing, right? And we had this quote unquote introductory call that allows us to not talk about numbers and just talk about the client, right? And tell them a little bit about what we do and how we seek to serve our clients. Now, when I first started my business, anything that could fog up a window,
right.
Like, let's do it, sign on the dotted line. But I found myself having to go back and talk to those clients like, hey, this isn't gonna be a good fit for our business, right? Now, I believe in collaboration over competition. So if it's not a good fit for me, I know that it may be a good fit for one of my colleagues, right? So having a network of advisors to say, hey, this person can serve you. Larry would be a good job at what you're trying to achieve. Makes sense to me, right?
Sure.
So I think that call is super beneficial.
Absolutely, and there are some people that aren't a good fit for you or your network, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I wanted to touch on one thing that really touched me last year. I think the year was 2020. I wrote an article, and the article was called "It Could Have Been Me." And I wrote it out of frustration of the George Floyd murder, as you know.
Yep.
And I posted it on Twitter. It was picked up by Financial Planning Magazine and all these different publications, and you saw it. And in that article, I recapped, my experience in driving my car as a college graduate or about to graduate from Cal Berkeley, getting pulled over and being asked if I had any papers. And I'm like, what papers? What are? They're like, probation papers. And I was like, why would you think that about me? Gave them my Cal photo ID, my regular license, Cal alumni sweatshirt on, kind of early celebrating. And it came out. And I just want to say thank you, because you were one of the only advisors that picked up the phone and gave me a call like, hey, I read your article. It was great. And I just want to let you know that I stand with you. Right. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that. And I think that comes from your upbringing. That shows a lot about the values that you have. And it just says a lot about you. So I was waiting for this moment to just tell you that I appreciate you doing that.
I appreciate that. And I find that, unfortunately, in the social media world, Twitter, Facebook, whatever platform, it's great making comments and doing DMs, but I really feel there are certain things in life that you still have to pick up the phone, maybe going back to my telemarketer days, pick up the phone and actually have a conversation with somebody to let them know that you support them.
Yeah, so I really appreciate that.
And thank you for sharing the story, because I think, like a lot of things, people like you sharing those stories can only help break down the barriers and help other people through, troubling times perhaps as well.
I wanted to talk about that with you. You talk about breaking down the barriers. I think Mitlin Financial is living that practice, right? Your firm, women, people of color work at your firm, right? One of my good friends, Jarrell Bland, who's your associate, right? Mm-hmm. You are literally doing what we preach about in the industry and have been for over the last 15 years. My motto for this is push-pull. As a person of color or an underrepresented advisor, I think that I have a responsibility to push those ahead of me forward and pull those behind me through the same doors and give them the same opportunities that I've been able to have. What I notice is that I can't do this alone. I need Larry Sprungs of the world to help me, right? Do this, and you're doing it through your practice. What made you do it? Like, what made you feel like you had a responsibility to give anybody an opportunity to be successful in the industry?
When I was looking to hire for the role, I was looking to hire the best possible person that I felt could fulfill that role, regardless of anything. And it just so happened that Jarrell Bland, who happened to be a black advisor, was that guy.
Right.
And I think we have a responsibility as advisors to hire the best people, because it only benefits our culture at the firm level. It only benefits our culture at a client level. And the reality is, if you look around, not everybody who has money looks like me, plus or minus 10 years. They look like you. They look like Jarrell. They look like Rose, who works in my office. So having that, vision and that culture in there is very helpful. So it wasn't really a strategic thing saying, hey, we want to do this, but at the same time, I'm not going to prohibit bringing in a good person because they don't fit what clients or others think the people at my firm should be looking like.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be something that we're going to, tolerate.
I think I sat at a conference in 2020, January of 2020 in Orlando, Florida, with Lizetta Braxton, who's been on this show, with Sonia Dreisler, who's been on our other show, Grow, the Grow podcast, and another person from BlackRock. And I don't think that our screams can be heard from the bottom, being an underrepresented advisor. It has to be met with voices and people of the majority to help this initiative be pushed forward, right? So again, I thank you for that. I wanted to ask you one final question. Go ahead.
I wanted to say something about that I was a little lax in mentioning. That event, that panel you were talking about, I was there.
We met.
And that was a life-changing panel, because, and I'll tell you why. The stories that you all shared were horrifying to me. And I had never experienced or even witnessed anything like any of the stories that I heard on that panel. And I literally, that was right after I had hired Jarrell. I literally went back to my office, sat Jarrell down, and I said, I went to this panel, this is what was said, this is what's going on. I just want you to know that if you see anything, you hear anything, whether it's from me inadvertently, not knowing, maybe I'm unaware, or a client, I want you to bring that to my attention, because we will not tolerate that here. And that was a life-changing panel for me, because I had never experienced or witnessed anything like the stories I was saying. So you, I guess, inadvertently helped make some of that change that we have at Mitlin because of your involvement there. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you. And you came up to me after, we shook hands. I think I met your wife that day as well.
Yep.
And you've been consistent since then with the phone call, with what you're doing in your firm. And I think that you're a model or an example for how more people should be in our industry. Wanted to ask you one more question, right? And this is the final question that I try to ask all guests, at least when I remember, right? If you could go back and give yourself one piece of personal and one piece of business advice, what would these two pieces of advice be?
So, I mean, from a personal perspective, there are two things that I would say. One is, we were talking about family, is I would have started taking time out earlier on. I think that that's something that's very important. I think advisors in general are stressed. And I think spending time with family and friends is something we have to carve out. You know, as Dan Sullivan says, those free days, right? You got to have those free days. That's one. And two, going to the human part, I was very reluctant earlier on in sharing some of my personal stuff, if you will, on social media. Like when I went on vacation and did things, or out in the community. And I think that's something that we as advisors have to share. And I would have started much, much earlier doing that, because I think that that's an important thing, and an important thing for us to humanize what we're doing and attract people that we're working with. From a business side, which that's kind of a business side, the social media piece, but it was more personal than a business decision to me. From the business side, the RIA, going RIA like I did, I would have done that much earlier. And I think that, you know, especially now, I think that that's where the trend's going. And, you know, like I made that comment about 2000, saying this is what got me here. It's not going to be what gets me there. I think the writing's on the wall that shift is now almost moving exclusively in that direction. And then for those advisors who are looking to create a practice or a business, do it, you know, do it. Get involved, or find a firm that you could become a part of and have a meaningful role in, and, you know, help change the industry. And to your point earlier, make sure you understand that it wasn't built overnight. You have to be proactive, but you also have to be to a point where you're comfortable taking a little bit longer. Great things don't happen overnight, and they always take longer than you expect. Think about building a house or any construction project you ever had. They hardly ever end on time, right? They're always a little bit longer, because those good things are worth waiting for.
Give it time and give yourself grace. Larry,
yes,
you are a gem in our industry. I appreciate you. Before we go, where can people find you on social media, or just to keep up with your podcasting firm?
Yeah, so they can find us at mitlinfinancial.com. The website, the podcast is Mitlin Money Mindset, and I'm on every social media platform. You can find me as Lawrence Sprung, except for Instagram, I'm Larry Sprung. But you put in my name, you'll find me.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Human Advisor Podcast. If you want to keep up with everything that we're doing here at Altruist, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm your host, Dasarte Yarnway. We'll see you here again soon.